You're listening to session number 1 of the Trailer Music Composers Podcast. One man, one microphone, and one medium-sized coffee. Welcome to the Trailer Music Composers Podcast. I often get asked by students and friends, actually, how did I get into trailer music? It's a pretty niche job to be writing music specifically for film trailers. And in this first episode, I just really wanted to give you guys an insight into my story and how I got to where I am. And for those of you who don't know me, where I am is I'm a full-time trailer music composer. I've won multiple awards, and I say full-time. I'm not full-time. I do it a few hours a day, some days of the week. So I am incredibly blessed. But I got here by working hard, which is, the same story of most successful people. But I find it really interesting telling people my story because some people want to have the magic bullet. They want to hear that, I just phoned this one person and they got me a job. I landed a like 300 grand sink and I was done. It wasn't like that. I could go back and go, well, it all started back when I was 2 and I started playing with pots and pans. Obviously, I think I had a fascination with sound back then when I was 2. Constantly showing that photo of me inside the pots and pans cupboard. And, I'm quite happy to see that my kids go inside the pots and pans cupboard. So maybe they've got a fascination with sound too. But I grew up listening to a lot of music. When my mum wasn't sort of hammering out Lionel Richie and ABBA, we had film scores playing. Specifically Last of the Mohicans, that one's stuck in my mind quite vividly, and Michael Nyman's The Piano film score. So I had all this stuff sort of ticking away in my mind, and at the time you don't really realise that you're soaking it up like a sponge. At the time you're like, oh my goodness, would you turn that music off? I want to listen to the Smashing Pumpkins, come on. Which obviously Pumpkins are amazing and they have a huge part in my musical legacy. Legacy sounds a bit pompous, but musical vocabulary. I grew up with lots of music going on, and at some point I started learning the keyboard. I don't think I got very far because practicing as a 10, 11-year-old really wasn't on my radar. I kept it up for a few years because I liked my teacher. He was really nice, really enthusiastic, and I did like music. Although at that point in my my musical taste was somewhere around Janet Jackson and Simply Red. So I can't vouch for my taste back then, but the fact and the most important part of it is that I just listened to what I like and I did what I liked, and that was really important. And then what happened was my older brother, he picked up a guitar and was like, hey, Mum, I want to have guitar lessons. Can I have those, please? And he started having guitar lessons. And, obviously as the younger brother, I was like, my brother's so cool, I'm going to learn guitar too. So what I did was when he was out, I'd sneak into his room and take his guitar and try and learn Smashing Pumpkins songs. And that was, in my mind, that was the huge turning point for me, was when I started learning how to play the guitar. It was like, firstly, the chicks are going to dig this. And secondly, I can play my favorite songs. Specifically, I remember playing Cherub Rock, not the actual lead line. I had a little chord book that taught me the chords of it. And, it was quite simple, E's, A's and D's. So I was very, very happy. And I got my mum and brother up into the room and I was like, hey guys, look what I can do. I'm basically a rock star. I started jamming out. And that progressed, I played guitar all the time. I joined some bands and I started writing my own stuff. I didn't know how to do it, so I just had a little tape recorder I picked up from a car boot sale, which I still have today. And I just started playing music into it and recording it, and that was my process. And then my mum bought me a 4-track recorder as a Christmas present one year. which was a bit beyond me, admittedly. I did manage to track out 4 guitar parts, but it was a real realization that actually, I can't play in time at all. I can write nice parts, but I cannot play them together. It sounded like some kind of strange tape delay effect. So yeah, that was that passion for the guitar and music was stemmed hugely by Billy Corgan and the Smashing Pumpkins, and by me and my friends being in a band together, playing covers of Nirvana, Foo Fighters, a small band called the Llama Farmers, and we absolutely loved it. We had a whale of a time, and as a result of that, I got to that point when I think I was about 18. I thought, yeah, actually, I'm not sure whether I want to do what I want to do with my life. So I actually decided to enroll in an art course. Don't worry, this actually makes sense when it comes back to it. So I was in the band at the time, and I think we were, we'd all left school, and we were all a bit like, we don't want to do it with ourselves. We took a year out to do the band, but because none of us were particularly motivated to play live, we just ended up just practicing all the time, which was good. But meanwhile, I was at art college, enjoying doing art and photography and illustration and stuff, and that was great fun. I met my wife there, which was obviously magical. And then that was, for me, that was the reason to be there. And then I decided to do a course at a college called the ACM, which was Academy of Contemporary Music, which was kind of like, at the time I thought what it would teach me how to play amazing guitar and be an amazing musician, which it did. It was absolutely huge for teaching me oral skills, as in oral, as in AU, my listening skills, playing to a metronome, all these things. They basically trained you as session musicians, which meant that after that year, I absolutely hated playing the electric guitar. I was so sick of it, because they'd be like, you need to practice 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day. And, there's only so many times you can play your modes without being insanely bored. So because of that, I was attracted to a course at a university in Brighton that was called Music and Visual Art, and it was a combination of music and art. And I thought, well, I did an art course last year. I'm doing a music course this year. Maybe this is for me. And and I had quite a stark realization that year that actually I didn't want to be in a band, because playing live and playing with other musicians wasn't the thing that I enjoyed. The thing that I enjoyed was, sadly, sitting on my own, writing music. And that's what I had been doing for years and years, doing that in my bedroom, just sitting and playing and writing music. And at that point, I had begun to realize the effect that film scores had on my life, specifically at this point, Danny Elfman. So I started listening to Danny Elfman scores and trying to figure them out on the guitar, and I realized there was this whole world of writing that I didn't understand. So I signed up to this university degree, and luckily I got in, which was nice. And I had an absolutely amazing tutor called Connell Gleeson. This was a bit of a fanboy moment for me. He did some orchestration on Star Trek: The Next Generation, and had worked in the States as an orchestrator, and was an amazing composer. And yeah, the course was just wonderfully diverse. It taught you everything from using Max MSP and Logic to writing music for installations and doing installations. So like I said, it was art and music, and we studied all these composers, we studied all these artists, we studied all these dancers. It was fantastic. It was the thing that laid the foundations for me of actually writing music. It doesn't have to be this really sort of anal 3-minute pop song where everything has to be done in a certain way. It can be weird and it can be wonderful, and it was great. It really brought to me this passion for sound and exploring noises, because some of the composers we listen to, for instance, like the Musique Concrète movement, where, it's just recording sounds and playing them out live, highlighting the crazy sounds that you are surrounded by every day. That was amazing. And as a result, I started to focus on writing music whilst I was at this course, and I realized actually I wanted to be a film composer. I wanted to write music for things like Danny Elfman, like John Williams, like John Barry, and I just completely immersed myself in film scores. I would, in the evenings, whilst my girlfriend was doing her English literature reading, I would sit there with my headphones listening to Debussy, reading the scores, and I really taught myself a great deal about writing by studying scores in the evening. And I had this little sort of workbook where I had a section on orchestration, so I studied orchestration. I actually had I was lucky enough that my mum was generous to pay for orchestration lessons with a local composer called Rohan Krivacek, who was an absolutely amazing musician. Specifically a sort of a Yiddish folk musician, and I mean the stuff he played was amazing. And I'd walk into his studio, which was like this kind of dark homage to Tom Waits, with all these wonderful foreign instruments hanging on the ceiling that I'd never heard before. And I'd sort of say, "Hey, look, Rohan, I've written this," and he'd pull down this bizarre clarinet from some deep dark area in Asia and say, "Well, how about this?" And he'd play the line that I wrote on this instrument, and the magic I felt when I heard him play my idea, it was just, I can't really tell you how magical that was for me. So like I said, I completely immersed myself in all this stuff, all the while thinking, I'm going to be a film composer. So I started approaching short film directors and all sorts of people, just being like, "Hey, I'm a composer. Can I write for your film? Hey, I'm a composer. Can I write for your dance troupe?" So I did some dance pieces, which were amazing, and I did some short films, which weren't so amazing. Mostly because it was like I was saying I'm a composer and I'm a film composer, but then I didn't have the first clue about producing music on a computer. I had dabbled in Logic, but that was the point where I said, okay, well, I need to have a recording system at home. So I grabbed a pirate copy of Reason and Cakewalk Pro, and that was when I started recording my own sounds and exploring production. I didn't have a MIDI keyboard back then, so I used to write all my MIDI parts in with a mouse, which at the time it seemed like magical, because I'd gone from writing score, where you'd spend however long with a pen and paper writing it down and then having to hear somebody else play it. I could wait weeks for that to happen. But this, I could click a mouse and I'd hear the sound immediately. It was just magic. So loved Reason. Cakewalk Pro, I had my first experience in sampling with Cakewalk Pro. I got my friend Hannah around. She played some violin notes for me and I layered them on Cakewalk Pro, and it was... It was just wonderful. I loved that part of my life, at that time of my life. It was all play. I had this passion in my mind that I was going to be a film composer, and I just played around with the idea. Obviously, when I left university, it was a shock, because I was like, well, it wasn't a massive shock because me and my wife went traveling for several months, which was, eye-opening and wonderful and amazing all at once. But when I got back, we were like, yeah, let's buy a house. And we'd saved up a tiny amount of money, bought a teeny little 2 up, 2 down. And I said, you know what? I'm going to make a go of this composition thing. And then after like 2 months of not hearing anything back from anybody, not getting any work or anything, I realized I was going to have to get a job. So I got a job teaching music. And this was my career for 7 years, teaching guitar. I used to teach African drums, taught basically all the knowledge I had accumulated up to this point. I taught to children in schools, and I absolutely loved the job. And when I wasn't teaching, because it was only part-time teaching jobs, I was writing and approaching companies about short films and all sorts, And I was blessed that I managed to get some work writing for corporate films, and that was like, this is amazing. I'm getting paid to write music. And that was, again, massive boost to my confidence. And I just kept plugging away. In the meantime, one of my friends was doing a show for a record label, and they wanted some music like 24, like Sean Callery's 24 music to walk on stage to, like cool, emotive music. And And I did that, and the lead singer's girlfriend was working for a publisher called Boozy and Hawkes. So she approached me and said, "Hey, send me in your demo reel. I do stuff for advertising." And I started, I sent in like this CD of 50 of my greatest works, and she sort of emailed me back saying, "Hey, look, this one is fantastic. Let's get you in." So I came in there and signed up as a composer with them, which was just epic. That was like, I am going to be a composer, this is going to be huge. Little did I realize that actually in that world, in the advertising sync world, you don't get paid unless you get the job. So I was doing tons and tons of free work, and that continued for years and years, pitching endlessly. But the great thing was I was just learning my craft. Pitching, getting feedback, all the while increasing the amount of sample libraries I had, increasing the speed of my working. I even got a MIDI keyboard. It was very exciting. And then that continued. But whilst I was working there, I was also producing my own music just for fun, because I thought, actually, I want to write my own stuff. So I did this stuff called Mr. Monocle's Quirky Delights, which was me playing a ukulele, whistling with a recorder, I think it was. And a young man there was called Vikram Goody, and he had just started at Boozy and Hawkes, and we got to talking. He said how much he loved my quirky, weird ukulele tracks, and we hit it off from there. And those of you who know me, you'll know that me and Vic have a very successful working relationship now, because he then set up the company Elephant Music, which I signed to. And, Vic was my big break, basically. Whilst I was teaching part-time, I was sending tracks to Vic, and Vic was starting to get me work that was paid. I'd had one or two, I'd call them hits, in speech marks, hits. One was like a cheese advert, which actually paid amazingly. And that was like, yay, I earned some money. I can pay my way. And, I think me and Vic, our first one was like a £500 sync for a Hewlett-Packard online advert, which again was huge for us both. I think that was both our first syncs together. So he set up Elephant Music, and we were pitching for stuff. He moved over to LA for a little bit and came back, and he said, "You know what, Rich? I just want some piano music. People are asking for piano music. Can you write piano music?" And I said, "Vic, I love writing piano music. I love it." So I wrote. It was at this time I also stumbled upon Spitfire Audio. They had started releasing their labs, which then were donationware. So I donated £2 or £3, whatever it was, to buy their. It was called then the felt piano, but it's now called the soft piano. I downloaded the soft piano, and I was so inspired by this weird and wonderful sound that I then wrote 5 albums, 50 tracks in about 3 or 4 weeks. I sent them to Vic, and he was like, "Oh, this is amazing," and he started pitching them. All the while I was still teaching. I'd actually started upping my hours teaching, because I was getting nervous that I wasn't going to get any more work as a composer. Then Vic was pitching all this piano work stuff, and I was really proud of myself, because I absolutely loved the albums, loved the sound. And then Vic suddenly sort of turned around to me and said, "Look, Rich, I'm starting to do trailer work. So I'm going to start pitching your stuff for trailers, and we're going to start producing trailer albums, and I want you to get on board." And I was like, "Great. I don't really know how to do trailers. I do a little bit, but great, let's do this." And it was at this time as well, I was sort of saying to my wife, I don't really want to do teaching anymore. I want to be a full-time composer. That's what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. I'm scared to leave because I don't have any money. I don't know what to do. And it was also the same time our daughter was born, Imogen. So she was, so it was about, she'd just been born, and I realized actually, I want to be around when my daughter's little. So I decided to hand in my notice teaching, and this is the wonderful thing about the universe, and you'll find out that I'm actually a bit of a beardy weirdy, as my dad would call it, but or crunchy, I think you call them in the States. The universe handed me something. I handed in my notice, and it felt like within a week, all of a sudden I got an email from Boozy and Hawks, who I still worked with at the time, saying, hey, this Japanese film is being produced and they like your stuff and want you to score the film. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a film composer. This is the dream. This is amazing. And actually scoring that film was one of the most wonderful experiences I've had in my musical career. It was fantastic. The easiest job I've had. They sent me a spreadsheet, of the track, the track they wanted and so the track was, the mood they wanted, the length of it, and any other keywords to do with instruments or speed. I just wrote tracks based on that. They only gave me one change to make, and I think I wrote about 20 cues. That's like 60 minutes of music. And then as well as that, Vic phones me up and says, Rich, we just landed 2 IBM adverts, and it paid, I think they paid really well, actually. I think in total I got 15 grand, which was like, oh my gosh, that's my next year's mortgage. I've got a safety net for a year. So it was like, yes, I put this money aside. I handed in my notice at the same time. And everything just fell into place. And from there, I just started, I was still working with lots of other companies, so as well as Vic, because I've always been told, diversify yourself because this, that, and the other. Over time, mine and Vic's relationship just got better and better, working relationship that is, and he just started getting more and more work, and I realized, is it Pareto's law? I forget what it's called, the 80-20 principle. Like 80%, in fact 90% of my income was coming from Vic, but it was only 20% of the time I was working. So I kind of just left everybody else and just started working with Vic. And that's where my days kind of changed to me and my wife sharing our days. And because I wasn't working as much, I was earning well, and I decided, me and my wife are going to share the childcare, so we'd split the days between us. And that's pretty much how it has been since my daughter was 1. So that's sort of 5 years ago. And in those 5 years, my career has absolutely rocketed. I've won, I think, up to date 8 awards. I get regular trailers. I mean, usually it's between 2 and 4 or 5 a month as I speak, which is where are we? November 2019. So my career is absolutely amazing, and what happened as I started to get successful, and I started to get some money. This was very exciting. Oh, I can actually buy a car that's not 17 years old. So what I did was, people kept asking me, Rich, how do you do what you do? At first I was like, hard work, And then people kept pestering me. So I said, look, okay, I'll show you. I went around to a friend's house and I showed him what I do. I was like, this, that, and the other. And I sort of laid out a trailer queue. And he was like, whoa, that's blown my mind. So I thought, maybe there's something in this. So I decided to message a few of my friends and composer friends, that is, and say like, hey guys, I'm going to write a course. Will you pay me to write the course? So they all chipped in a nominal fee as like a kick up the backside for me to actually do the course. So I wrote this course called the Trailer Music Course. And the course basically kind of taught people all the ins and outs of trailer music, from wharms to rises to structure to mixing and mastering. And I was very, very lucky to have Toby Mason to agree to do a mixing and mastering masterclass at the end of that course as well. It's great. And here I am today. I have the Trailer Music School, which is where I have students studying all the courses that I have produced in writing trailer music. I get trailer placements regularly, and it's not just one style of music either. That's the wonderful thing. I'm not just doing epic. I'm doing, stomp swagger drums. I'm doing sort of delicate piano. I'm doing dark sound design. I'm doing sort of thriller organic strings. It's a wonderful world to be working in, trailer music. You can be as creative as you like, as weird as you like, because there's going to be a film that's going to use that music. If you watch all the trailers on the Apple trailer site or Joe Blow trailers, whichever one you watch, you will notice that actually trailer music isn't just epic music. Trailer music spans all of the genres, all of the styles, and you can be very successful if you understand the structures and the formulas, which I feel like I do. So yeah, and here I am today, sat in my study, recording this first session of the podcast, which my students at the Trailer Music School have been asking, saying, Rich, there's no podcasts for trailer musicians. I thought, actually, there isn't. I have a YouTube channel which shows people sort of how to write what I do, how to do what I do, and then obviously I have my Trailer Music School, which is more in-depth kind of group coaching, teaching people to get better. And then if they do get better, then I help them produce an album and we pitch it to trailer companies, usually with Vic at Mammoth or Elephant. So it's gone amazingly, and hence the podcast. And this podcast for me is going to be not like a diary of a trailer composer, but something along those lines, more like thoughts that I can't express on video. Well, I could express them on video, but a talking head for me isn't most exciting. And I love podcasts. Going for a walk in the woods with my now 3-month-old, I'll be listening to podcasts. Driving in the car, podcasts on. So it'll be nice for me to deliver content to you guys who are on your commute, who are going for your runs, doing a bit of shopping, doing a bit of ironing, and wanna keep studying, keep learning about trailer music. So I will be delivering content about trailer music through this podcast. And in this episode, I talked about how I got to where I am. There are obviously things I missed out, not on purpose, just because I don't think you want to be dealing with all the minor details, but the general shift of, it was a side hustle for me for 7 years before I went full time. That's not always the case. My friend Kieran Birch did it much, much quicker. He was very, very focused, and his writing is very niche as well. And he's an incredibly talented guy. So your story might be different. Your story might be like, hey, did your course, Rich? In fact, some of my students have been like this. They did my course. They sold a track. Boom, they are now composers, which has been amazing. So if you can learn anything from my story, it's this. Focus on the things you enjoy. Don't spend too much time doing the things you don't enjoy. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to play to your strengths. The moment I played to my strengths was the moment I started to become more successful. And that's what you need to do. Follow your enjoyment. Okay, so if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel, and you can always pop on over to the Trailer Music School where you can read the show notes for this podcast. As always, thanks so much for listening, and take care.